I heard my daughter-in-law tell our entire family at my own dining table that I was dead weight. Not elderly, not slowing down. Dead weight. Everyone at that table went silent in a way I had never heard a room go silent before. Forks stopped scraping against plates. My daughter Sarah, visiting from out of town, stared, with her mouth slightly open. My son David stared down at his mashed potatoes, suddenly finding them incredibly interesting. And I sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my wine in her face. I just looked at Jessica. A woman who had been living in my 4-bedroom house, rent-free for 3 years, wearing a cashmere sweater I bought her for Christmas. Let me back up. I'm Susan Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, a widow of 5 years, and I own my home in the suburbs of Chicago outright. When David and Jessica had my twin grandsons, they claimed they needed to save for a down payment. I opened my doors. I thought I was helping my family get a head start. Instead, I became a live-in nanny, a personal chef, and an open wallet. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration of my late husband's birthday. I cooked his favorite roast. Jessica sat at the head of the table, a habit she developed recently, and poured herself a second glass of wine. Sarah asked how things were going around the house. Jessica sighed, swirling her glass. Oh, it's a lot. David works so hard, and I'm managing the boys. Honestly, having Susan around is just dead weight these days. She forgets to fold the laundry right, and I basically run this house anyway. The silence stretched. It was heavy, suffocating. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an apology. I think I'm done eating, I murmured, my voice perfectly level. I walked out of the dining room and went upstairs. I heard hushed, panicked whispers erupt the second my bedroom door clicked shut. I thought that disrespect was the climax of the evening. I was wrong. The real betrayal was waiting for me in the dark. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of the television downstairs. They were watching a movie. My television, my electricity, my couch. At exactly 11:30 p.m. My cell phone vibrated on the nightstand. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar local number. I usually ignore late calls, but a strange instinct made me swipe answer. Hello, I whispered. Good evening. Am I speaking with Susan Mitchell? A man's voice asked. He sounded professional, clipped, and completely awake. This is she. Mrs. Mitchell, my name is Arthur Vance. I'm an attorney calling on behalf of your daughter-in-law, Jessica. I apologize for the late hour, but she left an urgent voicemail stating we needed to finalize the consent forms for the property transfer by tomorrow morning. I just wanted to confirm you received the email documents regarding the conservatorship and the deed transfer. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I sat up slowly, the blankets falling away. Property transfer? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Yes, ma'am. The documents shifting the title of the house to David and Jessica, along with the medical proxy. Jessica indicated you were fully on board given your declining cognitive state, and that we just needed your final signature to avoid probate later. They were trying to take my house. Not eventually. Tomorrow. Jessica had hired a lawyer to build a case that I was mentally unfit, using my own home as the prize and treating me like an obstacle to be managed. I didn't panic. I didn't scream at the lawyer. Mr. Vance, I replied smoothly. I believe Jessica has given you some premature information. There will be no signatures tomorrow. Have a good night. I ended the call. I sat in the quiet dark of my bedroom, a room I had shared with my husband for 30 years. They didn't just think I was dead weight. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was weak. I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I turned on the bedside lamp, pulled out a notepad, and started making a list. The next morning, I walked down the stairs at 7:00 a.m. sharp. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Pots from my roast were soaking in the sink. Jessica was sitting at the island sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, looking momentarily nervous. Morning. Look about last night at dinner. Where is David? I interrupted, my voice flat. He's getting dressed for work. Susan. I just meant that you've been tired lately and… Don't worry about it. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile you give a salesperson before you shut the door. I walked past her, ignoring the dirty dishes I usually scrubbed, and went straight to my home office. I locked the door behind me. I opened my heavy fireproof safe. Inside were the deeds, the vehicle titles, and my financial binders. Everything was exactly where I left it. I was the sole owner of this property. David's name was nowhere on the deed. I pulled out my recent credit card statements. For 2 years, I had kept David as an authorized user on my premium account for emergencies regarding the twins. I spent the next hour highlighting every transaction from the last month. A $400 charge at a luxury hair salon. A $1 $200 charge for a weekend resort stay I was never invited to. Hundreds of dollars at high-end boutiques. Jessica wasn't just living rent-free. She was financing her entire lifestyle on my dime while calling me a burden. David knocked softly on the office door. Mom? You in there? Jess said you seemed upset. I slid the statements into a folder. I unlocked the door and looked at my son. The boy I raised who sat silently while his wife insulted me, who was secretly plotting to strip away my independence. I'm fine, David, I stated, stepping past him. I have some errands to run. You two are handling dinner tonight. I didn't wait for his response. I grabbed my purse, walked out the front door, and drove straight to the bank. The bank was quiet at 9:00 a.m. I sat across from a pleasant branch manager named Helen. How can I help you today, Mrs. Mitchell? She asked. I need to make some immediate changes to my accounts, I instructed, handing her my ID. First, I want David Mitchell removed as an authorized user on all my credit cards. Immediately, Helen tapped her keyboard. Done. The card in his possession will decline if swiped. Perfect. Next, I want to close my current checking account and open a new one. Move all the funds over. I want a new account number, new routing number, and a new debit card. For 3 years, David had possessed my checking account routing number to occasionally help me pay the utility bills. I knew exactly how a malicious lawyer could use that access to drain funds or prove dependency. I was cutting the strings. By 10:30 a.m., my money was entirely isolated. My credit was locked down. I walked out of the bank breathing easier than I had in years. My next stop was a local storage facility. I rented a secure climate-controlled unit and paid for 6 months up front. When I returned home, the house was empty. David was at work, and Jessica had taken the twins to a play date. I went into the living room. Jessica had decorated it to her taste, but the expensive pieces, the antique Persian rug, the custom mahogany end tables, the crystal vases belonged to me. I spent the afternoon quietly packing my valuables. I boxed up the crystal. I rolled up the Persian rug. I took the beautiful antique clock off the mantel. I loaded them into my SUV and drove them straight to the storage unit. When I got back, the living room looked incredibly bare. Just the cheap modern sofa Jessica bought and a TV. I didn't leave a note. I just made a cup of tea, sat on the patio, and waited for the show to begin. Jessica walked through the front door at 3:00 p.m., her face flushed with absolute fury. She slammed her designer purse onto the kitchen counter. "Susan!" she shouted. I stepped in from the patio holding my teacup. "Yes. Did you do something to the credit card? I was just at Nordstrom buying winter coats for the boys. And my card declined." The cashier looked at me like I was a criminal. I tried to call David, but he's in a meeting. I took a slow sip of my tea. I canceled the card, Jessica. She froze, blinking rapidly. You… what? Why? How are we supposed to buy groceries? You both have jobs, I replied smoothly. David has a good salary. You work part-time. From now on, you will pay for your own groceries, your own clothes, and your own salon visits. My money is no longer available to you. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then she looked past me into the living room. She gasped, "Where is the rug? Where is the clock? Did we get robbed?" I answered, setting my teacup down. I decided to put some of my personal belongings in storage. Since I am just dead weight around here, I figured I should start lightening the load. Her face turned a mottled shade of red. She finally realized I had heard every word at dinner. She realized her comfortable, funded life was cracking. "You can't do this," she hissed, dropping the sweet daughter-in-law act entirely. "We have an arrangement. We had a favor." I corrected her, stepping closer so she could see exactly how calm I was. "A favor that has expired. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have the book to read." I walked up the stairs, leaving her standing in the echoing, bare living room. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. A text from David. "Mom, what is going on?" "Jess is crying." I didn't text back. Actions speak louder than arguments. Friday evening arrived. For 3 years, Friday night was Jessica and David's date night. It was an unspoken rule that I would cook dinner for the twins, bathe them, and put them to bed, while my son and his wife enjoyed expensive dinners on my credit card. At 5:30 p.m., Jessica walked down the stairs in a black cocktail dress, smelling of heavy perfume. David followed, adjusting his watch. "All right, we're heading out," Jessica announced, not even looking at me. "There's mac and cheese in the pantry for the boys. Make sure they're in bed by 8. I stood up from the armchair. I was wearing my wool coat and holding a small weekend suitcase. David stopped in his tracks. "Mom, where are you going?" "I'm driving up to Wisconsin to visit Sarah for the weekend," I stated simply. I picked up my car keys from the bowl. Jessica's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Wait, what? You can't leave. We have reservations at a steakhouse. Who is going to watch the boys?" "You are," I smiled, pulling the handle of my suitcase up. "You didn't tell us you were leaving." Jessica snapped her voice, pitching into a shrill whine. "You can't just abandon your responsibilities without notice." I looked her dead in the eye. "I have no responsibilities here, Jessica. I am a homeowner, not your employee. You have 2 hours to figure out dinner for your children. Enjoy your evening." I walked out the front door, the wheels of my suitcase clicking satisfyingly against the pavement. I heard David frantically calling my name from the porch, but I didn't turn around. I got into my car, turned the key, and drove away. That weekend at Sarah's was the most peaceful I'd had in years. I told my daughter everything. Sarah didn't offer pity. She offered a tight hug. "Take your house back, Mom," she whispered. "Don't let them breathe your air anymore." I fully intended to. But I wasn't just going to take the house back. I was going to get rid of it entirely. I returned home on Sunday afternoon. The house was a complete disaster. Toys were scattered across the hardwood floors, dirty dishes piled high in the sink, and a stain of spilled juice marked the hallway rug. It was the physical evidence of 2 people who had forgotten how to manage their own lives. Jessica stormed out of the kitchen the moment she heard the door close. "Do you have any idea how exhausting this weekend was?" she demanded. "We had to cancel our dinner. David had to take Monday off because we couldn't find a sitter." I ignored her completely. I walked my suitcase upstairs unpacked and came back down with a measuring tape and a clipboard. I started in the dining room, measuring the walls. I moved to the kitchen, taking notes on the granite countertops. Jessica trailed behind me, her frustration morphing into confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked, crossing her arms. I didn't answer. The doorbell rang. I walked over and swung it open to welcome a sharply dressed woman carrying a leather portfolio. "Hi, Susan. I'm Rachel, from Remax." She smiled warmly. "Come on in, Rachel." I guided her inside. "The house is a bit messy today, but you can get a good feel for the bones. The roof was replaced 3 years ago, and the HVAC is brand new." Jessica's jaw dropped. She stepped in front of Rachel, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Remax. Why is a real estate agent in our house? I stopped and looked at Jessica, tilting my head slightly. "It's not your house, Jessica. It's mine. And I'm putting it on the market tomorrow morning." David walked down the stairs just in time to hear the sentence. He froze his hand gripping the banister. "Mom, you can't be serious," David stammered. "Sell the house." "Where are we supposed to go? I suggest you start looking for apartments." I replied evenly. "Rachel, let me show you the master suite upstairs." I left them standing in the hallway, completely paralyzed. The control they thought they had over me vanished into thin air, replaced by the cold, hard reality of property rights. On Tuesday morning, a man in a truck arrived and hammered a large wooden "for sale" sign right into the front lawn. It looked beautiful. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on David and Jessica. For 3 years, they had saved absolutely nothing. My bank review showed they had squandered their supposed down payment fund on leased luxury cars, vacations, and expensive dinners. They had treated my home as their permanent free safety net. That evening, they ambushed me in the kitchen. David looked pale, sweating through his work shirt. "Mom, please. We need to talk about this," David begged, pulling out a chair. "You can't just kick us out to the curb. We have the boys." "You are not being kicked to the curb," I replied, wiping down the counter. "You are receiving a standard 30-day notice to vacate as required by state law. I will be handing you the official paperwork tomorrow." Jessica slammed her hands on the island. The polite mask was gone, replaced by pure, desperate malice. "You're doing this because of what I said at dinner," she sneered. "You're throwing your own grandchildren onto the street because your feelings got hurt." I stopped wiping the counter. I looked at her, my expression utterly void of sympathy. "I am doing this because you called me deadweight, yes. But mostly I am doing this because at 11:30 p.m., on the night of that dinner, a Mr. Arthur Vance called my phone by mistake." All the blood drained from Jessica's face. She stepped back, her hands dropping from the counter. David looked frantically between us. "Who is Arthur Vance?" "He is the attorney your wife hired," I explained calmly to my son, "to draft a conservatorship and a deed transfer. She was planning to have me declared mentally unfit so she could steal this house and shove me into a facility." David stared at his wife in horror. "Jessica, what did you do?" Jessica stammered, backing toward the hallway. I was just protecting our future. She's getting old, David. Somebody had to secure the asset. She called my home an asset. She called my life a liability." Jessica, cornered and desperate, decided to double down. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking with rage. "Fine," she shouted. "You want to play hardball? I'll call Arthur right now. You're clearly having a manic episode. We will get an emergency injunction. We'll prove you're not of sound mind to sell this house." She thought the threat of legal action would make me crumble. She thought I would beg to avoid court. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out a thick blue folder, and dropped it onto the kitchen island. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Go ahead and call him," I offered, gesturing to her phone. "While you're at it, you can fax him these." David slowly opened the folder. Inside was a certified letter from my primary care physician dated 2 days ago, confirming I was in perfect physical and cognitive health. Behind that was a full forensic accounting of my bank statements highlighting the $18,000 Jessica had spent on my credit card for non-essentials over the past year. You have no lease, you have no equity, and you have a documented history of financial exploitation of a senior citizen, I stated, keeping my voice lower and steadier than hers. If your lawyer tries to file a single piece of paper against my property, my next call won't be to an attorney. It will be to the IRS to report your unauthorized use of my funds. Jessica dropped her phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor. There was no grand legal battle. There was no complex trap. There was just a woman who owned her own home and controlled her own money, pulling the rug out from under parasites. You have 28 days left, I told them. I suggest you start packing. I picked up my tea and walked upstairs. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't hear a single whisper from them as I closed my door. The house sold in 8 days. A lovely young couple bought it, paying over the asking price. Moving day was a Friday. I had already moved my belongings into a beautiful ground floor condo closer to Sarah. I hired a moving company to clear my remaining furniture, leaving David and Jessica scrambling with rented U-Haul boxes. They couldn't afford a house. Because of their terrible credit and lack of savings, they had to sign a lease for a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a much less glamorous zip code. I stood on the porch, watching David load the last of the boys' toys into his car. He looked exhausted, older, and deeply embarrassed. He walked up the steps, hesitating. "Mom," he muttered, looking at his shoes. "I'm sorry. I really am. I should have stopped her. I looked at my son. I loved him. But I saw him clearly now. A passive man who would let his mother be destroyed as long as his life remained comfortable. I love you, David, I replied softly. But apologies don't build boundaries. Actions do. Focus on raising your boys. I didn't hug him. I just handed him the spare key to his new apartment that he had dropped on the porch. He nodded, swallowed hard, and drove away. I locked the front door of that big house for the last time. Now I wake up at 8:00 a.m. No one demands breakfast. No one expects me to fold their laundry. My condo is bright, filled with my antique Persian rug and my ticking mahogany clock. Sarah calls me every Sunday not to ask for money, but just to ask how my garden is growing. I sit on my balcony with my coffee, listening to the birds. I am 68 years old. I am nobody's maid, nobody's bank, and I am certainly nobody's dead weight. I am just a woman who finally learned how to close a door and keep it locked.